The story begins as we see a boy named Lloyd, who is being kicked out of the hero's party for being useless, but they don't know that he was secretly the one carrying the group. In a flashback, we see a girl named Merlin as she finds him in the middle of nowhere and she decides to take him in. She teaches him magic and shows him how to create fire, but she tells him that if he can't do it, she won't give him dinner. He manages to achieve it after practicing for the whole day, but she blows it out and burns him, telling him he still has much to learn. The next day, she shows him how to use water magic, so he follows her steps and makes progress, but she dumps water on him because his magic is too weak. After that, he makes a statue of her using snow magic, but she uses the statue to grab him, telling him that he still lacks power. She becomes sick one day, and he heals her using magic, so she hugs and thanks him for his help, but she immediately continues his training. After some time, Lloyd enters Merlin's room, but she accidentally drops a book, so he picks it up, but he suddenly gets a strange feeling and falls to his knees. She's surprised that he has the potential to become the chosen one, and she kisses his head while he's sleeping, promising to make sure that he doesn't make the same mistakes that she made. The next day, Lloyd grows a fruit using magic and asks Merlin for her opinion, but she grows the entire tree, telling him it's what real healing magic looks like. At night, Merlin tells Lloyd that a few people in the beast folk can wield unusual magic to control monsters, and he thinks it's amazing, but he asks her about ancient magic. So she mentions that he doesn't need to learn about it, because it went extinct a few centuries ago. He asks her what a magistone is, so she notes that it's a crystallization of mana, and it turns everything around it into magistone, which makes him wonder if they can be restored to their original condition. The next day, as Lloyd summons a staff, Merlin hits him, telling him he needs to do it faster, and she mentions that he's still inexperienced, so he should never slack off from training. After that, she takes him to a forest, where she gives him a knife, and tells him to survive using his magic for a week. After she leaves, he's immediately attacked by a monster, so he runs away, and he manages to escape by climbing up a tree. He knows he can't defeat monsters using white magic, so he'll just keep running away from them, and he spends the night in a cave, where he makes a magic circle to increase his finger strength. He spends the next few days moving through the forest, and he realizes that he needs to improve his search spell to find food, so he uses his magic circles to enhance his skills. He eventually runs into a monster, but he apologizes for trespassing into its territory, and he manages to escape by boosting his speed. He later returns home, but he passes out on the front door, and Merlin welcomes him back. After a while, Lloyd cleans the house, and he comes across a book, so he asks for Merlin's permission to borrow it. He tries doing other chores around the house, but she keeps bothering him, since she always needs his help to work on a new type of spell. She even casts a spell on him to make sure he doesn't sleep, and he notes that he still feels tired after working so much, but she tells him to just drink an energy potion. Merlin heads to Lloyd's room to wake him up, but he's nowhere to be found, and we see that he's gone to the city he was reading about. As he walks around, he's surprised by the number of people there. He buys something to eat with the last money he has, but a poster suddenly comes flying towards him, and it mentions that a party is looking for adventurers, so he decides to join it. Lloyd goes on his first mission with his new party, and their mission is to defeat a Cyclops that attacks them by causing the ceiling to collapse. Their leader Alan tells their healer to cast a healing spell, and Lloyd casts one as well, but nobody notices it. Their archer manages to blind the monster, and their mage summons ropes to restrain it, while Alan lands the finishing blow. After that, as the party rides through the city, everyone's impressed they were able to defeat the Cyclops. Alan gives a tiny part of the reward to Lloyd, telling him he shouldn't get offended by how little money he's getting, because he's just a D-rank adventurer. Alan proposes a toast, but Lloyd decides to leave because he doesn't like to drink, which annoys the other members. At night, a man named William goes to meet Merlin, telling her that Lloyd was accepted by the heroes' party, and she thinks it's time for him to experience real combat. But she thinks he won't have any problems if he doesn't get overconfident, and William wonders if she still regrets her past decisions, so she mentions that she won't repeat the same mistakes twice. He reminds her of how the Demon Lord tried to steal her grimoire, while also taking down all of her party members. But one of them, named Sybil, sacrificed himself to defeat him, and used ancient magic to revive everyone eliminated by the Demon Lord. In the city, a man is promoting a play about Alan's party, and he mentions how Alan is one of the 4 heroes who have been chosen by the Holy Swords, which are the nation's sacred treasures. We see Alan's party fighting a monster, and their tank Rena manages to block its attack, but she's surprised by how weak it is. The mage uses her bind spell to restrain the monster, while Alan jumps in the air and delivers the finishing blow. At night, Rena is reading a book about defense basics when Alan interrupts her, and she explains that she's studying because there's something off about the attacks she blocks with her shield. She mentions how she hasn't seen him training for a while, so he notes that he doesn't need to do anything because he's already OP. The next day, Alan learns that a golem has attacked the border guards, and since that area is also a route for black market smugglers, they need to make sure the soldiers there are safe. Lloyd leads the party to the golems, and Alan slashes one of them in half, but a mysterious person summons another one. Lloyd mentions that the person is a demon, explaining that the black gem in his staff is a magistone, and everyone realizes that he's using it to control the golems. Lloyd casts a spell on his comrades, and tells their archer to shoot the person, while another member teleports the staff into Lloyd's hand. He immediately seals it, but Alan is annoyed because Lloyd is giving everyone orders, and he prepares to attack the golem. Lloyd warns him that without the magistone, there's no telling what the golem might do, but Alan rushes towards it. Lloyd sees that he's about to get hit, so he pushes him out of the way, but Alan tells Lloyd not to interfere. The golem loses its power, and Alan jumps in the air, crushing it with his sword, but when they return from the mission, Alan fires Lloyd for being useless and tells him to get lost because he isn't strong enough to be in their party. Lloyd tries to join different parties, but they all reject him, and he prepares to leave the guild's building. But he hears a girl named Yui who's begging the receptionist to help her find a white mage, so she tells Yui about Lloyd. She asks him if he has a party, so he reveals that he's free, and she tells him to come with her. We go back to when Yui and her party are looking at a gang they're supposed to take out, and we learn that it's an A-rank mission, but they still think they can complete it. Their mage Silica begins the attack by shooting a fireball at the enemy, while their archer named Cross rains down arrows on them. Yui cuts down the bandits with her sword, and one of them is about to hit her, but their tank Dagas blocks the attack with his shield. He starts to get overpowered, so their white mage Clum casts a physical enhancement spell on him, which allows him to push away the bandit. They manage to defeat everyone, and the bandit leader wonders why they're so powerful, but Yui tells him to surrender. He sees her necklace and realizes that they're S-ranked adventurers, but he refuses to give up so easily. He summons a golem, and Yui tries to cut it down, but her attack has no effect, so she tells Clum to use enhancement magic. She appears to lose focus, so Yui calls her again, and she casts the spell on her, allowing her to cut the golem in half. Clum apologizes for spacing out, but Yui knows that she has a lot going on, and she wonders how Clum's sister Sylvie is doing. After that, Yui goes looking for a white mage, and she finds Lloyd, so she takes him to the rest of the party. They're surprised to see that she found a free white mage, and she introduces him to everyone as she welcomes him to the party, but he notes that he hasn't agreed to join them. They know that she dragged him there without explaining anything, so they think they should call off the quest, but she's worried about what will happen to their client if they don't help. Lloyd suggests giving the quest to another party, but they mention that it's an A-ranked quest, which means only A-ranked parties or above can accept it. But all of them are already out on a job except for them, and he's surprised to learn that they're S-rankers. Cross notes that they also can't borrow members from other parties, because they're required to work with the ones they've formed a contract with, and they don't think Lloyd can replace Clum. He starts to doubt himself, as he recalls how Alan told him he's useless, but Yui mentions that everything will be fine since he's an incredible white mage. They go outside, and Yui tells Lloyd to show them his powers, but he thinks he'll just disappoint them. Dagas thinks she's putting him on the spot by asking him to display his skills, and he notes that they should give him a specific spell to perform, so Yui tells him to cast enhancement magic on all of them. He's surprised that it's the only requirement for joining their party, but Cross thinks it's too difficult because most white mages can't use it. So they tell him to give up if he can't do it, instead of getting Yui's hopes up, but he decides to show them his power. He summons his staff, which surprises them because they don't understand where it came from, and he casts the spell on them without incantation. They're impressed by his skills, and they decide to test his enhancement magic, so Yui slashes a tree, and they're shocked by how easily she cut it in half. He notes that he casts 5 spells on them, because casting one seemed too simple to him, and he thought they were expecting more from him. He thinks they're disappointed in him, so he decides to leave, but they tell him they want to talk to him. They're shocked to learn that he was a part of Alan's party, and he mentions that he was fired for lacking power, but they don't understand why anyone would do that. Silica notes that most white mages can't cast 5 spells at once, but he believes that there are plenty of mages who are better than him, so they think there's something wrong with his standards. He mentions how they already had a white mage, so they should just take her with them, but Yui tells him that Clum has a sister who is always ill. She had to take care of her while going on adventures, but it finally wore her down, so she asked to leave the party. He's jealous that there are people who are worried about her, because his party didn't care for him at all, and he wonders what kind of illness Sylvie has. So Yui reveals that she doesn't know much about it, but she mentions that it's turning Sylvie's body into a Magistone, which makes him remember that Merlin taught him about it. Lloyd and Yui go to Clum's house, where he asks her about Sylvie's condition, so she reveals that while they were on a mission, Sylvie suddenly became sick and fell unconscious. She takes them to Sylvie's room, and as she opens the door, Lloyd is surprised by the unpleasant mana inside. She shows them how Sylvie's body is turning into Magistone, but Lloyd thinks he can heal her, and she wonders how he can do it, because even the most powerful healers told her it was impossible. He notes that Sylvie was probably pierced by a high-energy Magistone, and Clum reveals that they were in a high mana density cave when she was injured. He sees her wound, and realizes it's where the mana entered, before it started spreading throughout her body and turning her into Magistone. He casts a spell on her, which makes him feel weak, and Clum asks him what's happening, so he reveals that he cast an inverted mana consumption spell on Sylvie to absorb her mana. He explains that he had to remove the berserk mana inside her, because she can't recover if the mana is still in her body, and he starts to heal her. Clum notices that his healing spell is unusual, so he notes that it's a defective one with poor mana consumption efficiency, but it allows him to burn the mana he's absorbing. Yui wonders if he's doing something impressive, so Clum notes that his actions are beyond amazing, because he's using 2 different types of self-made spells. She's impressed by his ability to withstand using so much mana, realizing he isn't an ordinary person, and he manages to turn Sylvie back to normal. Yui tells him he's amazing, and Sylvie wakes up, so Clum grabs her hand and starts crying. Clum thanks him for his help, and notes that she'll go back to adventuring with Sylvie after she recovers, telling him to take care of the party. He mentions that he isn't an official member because he lacks power, but she isn't sure what he means, and tells him to just follow his heart. After that, as everyone is having dinner, they're amazed to learn that Lloyd healed Sylvie, which makes them happy for Clum. Yui thanks him for saving Sylvie, which makes him remember how Alan's party treated him, and he realizes that her party is different. He asks them if he can join them, so they all accept him with open arms, and Yui notes that they need to throw a welcome party for him, but they know that she's just looking for a chance to cut loose. They tell Lloyd to eat and drink as much as he likes, because it's their treat, but they're surprised by how hungry he is. He's amazed by the food in the city, but the others tell him it's just average, which confuses him because he thinks it's incredible. They wonder what he ate during his childhood, so he mentions that his master only cooked what was growing in the garden, or the meat from the beasts she defeated. So he started cooking their meals, but he could never get much flavor out of them. They ask him if his master is also a white mage, but he thinks she's more combat-oriented, because there were plenty of explosions whenever she experimented with magic. So they're surprised that she taught him support magic, even though she isn't a white mage. Silica wishes she had the chance to learn from her as well, and Lloyd advises her against it, which makes them think she must be quite harsh, but he mentions that she could be kind as well. They're about to start their strategy meeting, but they decide to explain the job to Lloyd first, so that he can understand what they're talking about. Yui mentions that she's bad at explaining things, so she asks Dagas to do it, but he tells her to get her act together, since she's their leader. He notes that their job is to defeat monsters that are tearing apart farms, and Lloyd is confused, because he's never heard about monsters from different species forming a pack. Dagas admits that it sounds weird, but Yui explains that it doesn't matter, because their job is to help people who are in trouble. Cross notes that he and Yui aren't good at fighting against a pack, so it will be Silica's time to shine, but she thinks she'll also struggle, because large area attacks consume a lot of mana. Yui wonders if Lloyd can cast offensive magic, and he mentions that even though he can do it, he isn't as powerful as a specialized mage. Dagas notes that he and Yui will gather the monsters in one place, where Silica can wipe them out, while Cross will protect them from the monsters, and Lloyd notes that he'll use his spells to support them. Silica is excited to see him in action, but he tells her she shouldn't get her hopes up, but Yui thinks he should be more confident. He thinks he's weak since he was cast out of Alan's party for lacking power, but Cross prefers people like him, instead of those who are arrogant just because they're strong. After that, as everyone goes towards the inn, Lloyd mentions that he can't afford to stay there, so Dagas gives him a bag of coins, telling him he'll deduct it from his reward for the quest. Lloyd promises to work hard to repay him, and he thinks about how everyone in the party is so kind, so he wants to be useful to them. The next day, Dagas praises Yui since she didn't oversleep, but she tells him to stop treating her like a kid. She wonders where everyone's bags are, so they note that Lloyd is carrying them using his storage magic, and they're glad they don't need to carry them all the way. He offers to teach it to them, telling them it isn't that difficult, but they need to train to increase their storage capacity, and Silica mentions that she wants to learn it. They start their journey, and as they approach the nation of demons, Dagas tells Lloyd that even though the demons are quiet at the moment, there's no telling when they'll try to conquer the continent again. They come across an unstable bridge, so Yui asks a question to distract them from how scary it is, and they all start giving weird answers. She tells Lloyd to crack a dumb joke as well, but he apologizes because he doesn't know what she means, telling them it isn't a skill he learned from his master. Cross tells him that he just needs to say something silly, but seeing how hard he's trying, Yui mentions that it defeats the purpose of why they're doing it. She notes that they came up with the game to keep their minds at ease during long journeys, because staying on the edge wears them down. She asks another question, and Lloyd tries to give a silly answer, but even though he still can't do it right, they tell him he's starting to get it. They arrive at their camp point, where Lloyd takes out their bags, and they set up camp. Yui and Silica want to wash up in the river, but Dagas tells them they need to gather firewood and food, so Lloyd offers to do it for them. As he's walking through the forest, he finds the fruit he ate when he was a kid, and he goes to pick it up, but he sees that Yui and Silica are being attacked by a monster. He hits it with his flames to draw its attention, and he gives Yui and Silica their weapons, before buffing them with his spells. The monster is about to attack him, but Yui cuts it in half, while Silica destroys it with her fireball, but she doesn't understand how she was able to produce so much firepower. Yui thanks him for his help, but as she gives her sword back to him, her towel accidentally falls off, which makes her embarrassed. After that, they return to the camp, where Lloyd shows them how to use storage magic, but they can't do it, so he thinks he's a bad teacher. But they tell him not to be so hard on himself, because they're all beginners, and Silica manages to use the magic with incantation. So they realize that they need to do the same thing she did, because they aren't as talented as Lloyd. At night, Lloyd wonders if something is wrong with Yui, and she just thanks him for joining their party. He wonders why she's obsessed with the quest, so she reveals that her village was attacked by monsters when she was a kid, and she was the only survivor. So she couldn't stay back when she heard of the quest, and she knows that small villages struggle to survive if their farms are destroyed, but Lloyd suddenly senses monsters nearby. So he tells her to wake everyone up, and they realize that the monsters are the ones mentioned in the quest. They try to get away without making a noise, but Yui steps on a stick, which gives away their position. They're surrounded by 3 spiders, who shoot webs at them, and they manage to take away Silica's staff. Lloyd holds the spiders in place, while Yui attacks them, and Cross takes back the staff. Lloyd tells them to help Yui, so Silica summons fireballs, while Cross fires his arrows, which pass through them and burn the monsters. Lloyd apologizes for ordering them around, but they're just happy that he helped them, telling him he's a good leader. The next day, all of them use storage magic to carry their bags, and they continue their journey, but Lloyd wonders where the monsters that attacked them were headed. At night, Yui sees that Lloyd plans to do a solo watch once again, and Silica thinks they should keep normal shifts, because he might get worn out, but he assures them that he's fine. Yui tries to convince him to rest, but Silica stops her, and asks him to tell them if it becomes too much for him to handle. As they continue their journey, Lloyd uses his search magic to make sure there are no monsters around them, and Yui is surprised that he can even use such magic. She thinks it must be putting too much burden on him, so she wonders if she can help in any way, but he says he's fine, which makes her disappointed. As they rest at night, Yui thinks that Lloyd doesn't trust them, which is why he's doing everything alone. Silica tells her that everyone has their own way of working, and she reminds her how they also weren't that close with each other in the beginning. She thinks there must be a reason why he works so hard, and why he isn't confident in his abilities, while Yui is confused because even though he knows so much about magic, he knows nothing about the world. Silica thinks he'll eventually trust them on his own, so she tells Yui not to rush him, and she decides to follow Silica's advice. Meanwhile, Dagas asks Lloyd to help him with something, but he thinks that if he goes with him, there will be no one to keep watch, so Cross decides to switch places with him. Dagas shows him a trap he set, which will alert them if a monster approaches them, and he mentions that it's how they used to sleep before Lloyd joined the party. He tells Lloyd to rest for a while, but he notes that he won't be able to use search magic if he's asleep, so it's better if he keeps watch. Dagas asks him if he doesn't trust them, so Lloyd assures him it's not the case, but Dagas mentions that the way he does everything on his own makes them think they're untrustworthy. He notes that if he doesn't work hard, he'll cause problems for everyone, so Dagas tells him that the reason they formed the party is to make sure they can do things they can't achieve alone. So it's a given that they'll cause problems for each other, and he tells Lloyd to rely on his friends, but he mentions that he never even considered it, so Dagas wonders what kind of environment he's been living in. The next day, Lloyd asks Yui to help him bring water, and everyone's happy that he's asking them for help. We see a man named Mikkel, who learns that the Magistones have been put in the designated coordinates, and he asks about the high-ranking adventurers working in Ishtar. So his informant tells him they're out of the city because they've been swamped with quests, thanks to the damage caused by the monsters he collected. He mentions that only a few low-ranking adventurers in the heroes' party are remaining, and Mikkel is interested to see how they'll fare on their own. Meanwhile, as Lloyd and the others continue their journey, Yui feels something strange about the forest, and everyone agrees with her, because they haven't come across a single monster. But Lloyd increases his search magic area, and he notices a pack of monsters 10 kilometers ahead of them, so they realize that the monsters are around the farm that ordered the quest. But Yui is shocked that Lloyd can search up to 10 kilometers, and they tell her to stay calm, because they have more pressing matters to deal with. They arrive at the farm, and they're surprised to see that it's filled with monsters, while Lloyd is confused, because it's the only place he can sense monsters. Everyone realizes that their behavior is strange, because they're supposed to be in the forest, and Lloyd asks Yui where the owner of the farm is. So she reveals that he relocated to his son's house in the city, because he was injured by a wolf. Cross notices something strange in the farm, but the others can't see anything, because their eyes aren't as sharp, so Lloyd uses his magic to enhance their vision, and they realize it's a Magistone. Lloyd sees the mana of the beast folk around it, and he tells them that a few beast folk have the ability to control monsters with their unusual spells. He suddenly senses a horde of monsters approaching, and he thinks it's because of the Magistone, so Cross suggests running away. But Yui knows that if they don't do something, the monsters will destroy the farm, and Dagas isn't sure if they can escape. Silica notes that if they fight the monsters near the town, the residents will be affected, but Lloyd tells them he has a plan. He tells Cross to shoot the Magistone, and he thinks it won't break even if he hits it, but as he fires the arrow, Lloyd casts enhancement magic on him and his arrow. He hits the Magistone, shattering it into pieces, and he's surprised that Lloyd can cast magic on a person and a weapon at the same time, but he thinks anyone can do it. The wolves suddenly start attacking each other, and Lloyd thinks the group of monsters rushing towards them would stop as well, but he realizes that they're still approaching. As the monsters arrive, Silica creates a firestorm, and everyone's surprised by how strong the flames are, but they know it's because of Lloyd. The fire spreads to the forest, and the smoke blocks the vision of the flying monsters, so Lloyd uses his magic to reveal their position to Cross, who shoots them down with his arrows. After that, Lloyd tells Silica it's time for the last phase of their plan, but she's almost out of magic power, so he gives her a portion of his mana. She uses her magic to make it rain, and the water extinguishes the fire, as Lloyd notes that it should prevent wildfires. She's exhausted since her mana has run out, and Lloyd is also tired, so Yui and Dagas take care of the rest of the monsters. After that, Lloyd tells everyone they should hurry back to the town, because he thinks the person behind everything is really after Ishtar. He thinks the only reason they were given the quest was to make sure that all the high-ranking adventurers were away from the city, so that it can be easily taken over. Cross mentions that the heroes' party is still in the city, and the knights are there as well, so it won't be easy to invade it. Dagas thinks Lloyd's hunch is correct, so Yui mentions that they should return to the city quickly, just to make sure everything is okay. Lloyd drinks a potion and casts a spell on everyone to increase their speed before running off. Yui tells him to wait for them, and they run after him, but they're surprised by how fast they're moving. Meanwhile, Mikkel meets a man named Grist, who reports that their forces are about to enter Ishtar. Mikkel thinks they'll succeed because of a girl he kidnapped named Claire, and he notes that she's an interesting individual, saying they can use her to achieve their goals. Grist has no idea what he's talking about, but he trusts in Mikkel's ability because he's known as the Demon Lord's right-hand man. After Grist leaves, Mikkel visits Claire in the dungeon and borrows her powers to make potions. Lloyd and the others decide to rest for a while, and as he gives them potions to drink, Silica wonders if he's okay, because maintaining enhancement magic uses up a lot of mana. He thinks it's difficult for someone who isn't used to it, but he notes that he isn't having a hard time, because he already has the hang of it. He tells them how his master once threw him in the woods, and told him to find his way home, but he couldn't defeat the monsters, so he had to rely on his enhancement spells to survive. He thinks it's a common training exercise, but they tell him it isn't normal at all, and he gets the wrong idea, thinking they're so much better than him since he isn't training as hard as they are. Lloyd uses his search magic to scan the surrounding area, and they continue their journey, but he suddenly stops running, so they all bump into him. He notes that he senses something weird, so he tells them to go without him while he checks on it. But they refuse to let him go alone, because there's no telling what he'll find, and they know that he can't fight alone if something happens. He decides to accept their help, and he takes them to a hut, telling them there are demons inside it. He notes that demons aren't allowed to enter the continent's 3 major nations, but they wonder why he's acting like he just remembered it, so he tells them it's because he doesn't have any memories from his childhood. He mentions that when his master took him in, the war was already over, which makes them wonder if he's a war orphan. He tells them they need to deal with the situation, and Cross thinks they should report it to the knights in Ishtar, but Lloyd wants to gather information first. He senses the same mana from the Magistone, so he thinks they might be the ones after Ishtar, and he suggests taking a risk to go after them. Yui agrees with his decision, because they can't let the demons roam free, and everyone's surprised that she's finally acting like a leader. They look inside the house, but they see that it's empty, so Lloyd uses his search magic, and he realizes that the demons are underground. Silica uses earth magic to break into their hideout, and Yui threatens to kill one of them, asking him what they're doing there. Another demon throws the debris towards her, but she easily destroys it, and Cross eliminates the demon by hitting him with an arrow. One of the demons manages to get away, and the other 2 try to stop the party, but Cross hits them with his arrows, while Yui finishes them off. The last demon makes a cocoon around Claire, and tries to run away with her, but Lloyd and the others catch up to him, and he realizes that he can't escape. So he tries to attack them with his lightning, but Lloyd deflects it, and it pierces the demon's heart. They take Claire back to the house, and since they didn't get anything out of the demons, they know that she's the only one who can tell them what's going on. Lloyd starts to heal her, and Silica realizes that his healing magic is amazing, so he mentions that he has improved the spell. They're surprised because most adventurers can't do that, but he mentions how Merlin was always improving her spells, and notes that she's a weirdo. Meanwhile, 2 soldiers come across a Magistone, but as one of them touches it, they suddenly get surrounded by monsters, so they start running away. In the house, Claire finally wakes up, and Yui immediately starts asking her questions. Lloyd tells her they're adventurers, but they sensed beastfolk mana near a Magistone while they were on a mission, and she reveals that she was the one controlling the monsters. She reveals that the demons forced her to do it, which confirms that they're the ones after Ishtar, and Dagas notes that if they invade the city, it will be easier for them to conquer the continent. They decide to return to Ishtar, and Lloyd apologizes to Claire for making her run, but she notes that she would have been in greater trouble if he had left her behind. He senses a horde of monsters and an army approaching the city, so he tells the others to warn everyone, while he goes with Claire and asks her to lend her powers to him. In the city, Alan is annoyed since all the white mages applying for their party are worse than Lloyd, so Rena notes that he might have been special, but Alan still thinks he was useless. A knight suddenly arrives, telling them that a huge army of monsters is about to attack Ishtar, and Alan agrees to help defend the city. The other party members ask him if he's sure, so he notes that he can't refuse a request from the kingdom, and he thinks it's the perfect chance for him to show the citizens what he's capable of. Meanwhile, Lloyd and Claire scout the monsters, and they realize that there's another army, which is even bigger than the one attacking Ishtar. They think they need to defeat it, because if they join with the main forces, Ishtar won't survive. Claire asks him if there's a way to stop the monsters without hurting them, because he knows that they're being controlled, and he promises to do his best, since he notices that she cares for them. He wonders if she can use her magic to send the monsters back to their habitats, and she isn't sure if she can do it, because there are too many of them, but he assures her that he'll support her. She decides to give it a try, and she prepares to use her spell, but she notices something in the forest that is blocking her magic. In the city, Alan meets with the rest of the adventurers who were assigned to fight the monsters, but he sees that they're all weak because the A rank and above ones are out on quests. So he just tells them to stay out of his way, and they're angry at the way he's treating them, but the guild branch manager tells them to stop because it isn't the time to be fighting each other. Alan tells everyone about his plan, saying the mages will use their most powerful spells first, and he expects each of them to defeat 10 monsters. He notes that his party will work with the knights to defend the mages, so that they can recover enough mana to cast their spells again, and everyone will keep repeating the cycle until they defeat the monsters. The adventurers don't agree with his plan, because they aren't strong enough to defeat 10 monsters, and one of his party members named Mia tells him she isn't confident in her spells as well. She knows that everyone in the party got weaker after Lloyd left, and Rena notes that he's the only one who didn't notice, since he hasn't been training. She thinks he doesn't deserve the title of hero, so he tries to punch her, but she easily blocks his attack and tells him to quit. He sees that the other adventurers are against him as well, so he runs away, and they realize that they can't rely on him, so they think they should just retreat. But Rena tells them to stay calm, and notes that she's leading his party to fight by their side, which makes them motivated, but she wonders if anyone knows Lloyd. Meanwhile, Lloyd and Claire find a Magistone similar to the one he saw at the farm, and she mentions that the evil energy within it is disrupting her magic. She thinks there must be multiple Magistones there, and until they can neutralize all of them, she won't be able to control the monsters. He asks her if she can sense the Magistones, and she reveals that she can only do it if they're close to them, so he uses his magic to expand her senses. He also uses concealment magic to turn them invisible, so that they can easily neutralize the stones, and she's amazed by how skillful he is. But he warns her to be careful, because the magic will wear off if she gets hit. Meanwhile in Ishtar, Rena tells everyone that Lloyd was the cornerstone of their party, which makes them wonder why they kicked him out. So she notes that it's because they grew overconfident in their skills, but they didn't know that his support magic made them OP. The guild manager tells her that Lloyd is out on a quest, and it will take him a few days to return, but she thinks he can shorten his travel time with his magic. All the adventurers gather outside the city to face the monsters, but we learn that their only goal is to hold out until Lloyd arrives, and the monsters appear before them. So the archers fire arrows at them, while the tanks push them back with their shields, and the mages use their spells to attack the monsters. In the forest, Lloyd and Claire neutralize the last Magistone, but it makes the monsters fight each other, and they accidentally hit Claire, which makes her visible. So Lloyd distracts them before they can attack her, and he only dodges them instead of killing them, as she realizes that he's doing it because of her. She uses her magic to calm them down, and he wonders what she just did, so she notes that she persuaded them to go to the forest. She reveals that her magic can't control monsters, because it only allows her to convey her thoughts to them, and she thanks him for saving her. Meanwhile, the monsters start breaking through the adventurers protecting Ishtar, but Yui and the others arrive, and Silica immediately blows them away with her fire magic. They try to hold the line, and they're about to get overwhelmed, so Rena tells everyone not to give up, but a monster bites her arm. The adventurers are on their last legs, and they think it's all over for them, but Claire suddenly arrives with Lloyd, and she persuades the monsters to go back by singing a song. Lloyd is amazed by her powers, and she notes that she couldn't have projected her song across the battlefield without his help. But he tells her that even though he supported her, it was her magic that saved everyone. She tells him her real name, and he knows that she hid it for a reason, but he doesn't have time to ask her about it, because a group of golems is approaching the city. We see Mikkel looking at his map, and he thinks Ishtar has already fallen to the monsters, but a man suddenly appears, and he notes that they've received a report from the front line. Mikkel thinks Ishtar has been captured, but the man reveals that the monsters have scattered, and Mikkel can't believe his plan isn't going well. We return to Lloyd, as Claire reveals that she can't talk to the golems, and he uses his search spell to scan the area, realizing that the adventurers are gathered outside the wall. So he tells Claire to run, as he uses his enhancement magic to increase their speed, and they dash past the golems to reach the adventurers. They jump past the trenches, and the knights think he's amazing, wondering if he used enhancement magic. He joins up with the others, and Dagaz tells him the monsters are retreating, so he explains that it's all thanks to Claire, but he notes that they still need to deal with the golems. He suddenly falls to his knees, so everyone realizes he's running out of mana, but he notes that he'll be fine, reminding them that the battle isn't over yet. The guild manager wonders why he's with Claire, but Lloyd tells him to look after her, so he orders his knights to protect her. He's glad that Lloyd is back, calling him their only hope, and he's confused hearing this, so Rena explains that Alan didn't join the battle because he clashed with the other adventurers. Lloyd can't believe he abandoned everyone, and he realizes that she's injured, so he heals her with his magic. But she knows that he's almost at his limit because he used a lot of mana to heal her. She notes that they became the hero's party thanks to his support magic, but they never realized how useful he was until they expelled him, and she apologizes for not standing up for him. The golems approach the trenches, and the knights rush in, but they realize that their swords can't harm the golems, and they get punched away. The mages and archers try to take down the golems, but their attacks have no effect, and Yui realizes they're losing the battle, so Lloyd decides to cast enhancement magic on everyone. He notes that he can only buff one group at a time, but his friends still think he's amazing, because normal mages can't do that. He buffs everyone, but he explains that the effects won't last long, so they need to end the fight quickly. The golems approach the knights, but Yui notes that they can win thanks to Lloyd's enhancement magic, and Rena blocks a golem's attack, telling everyone not to be afraid. Yui slices a golem in half, and tells them they can win with Lloyd's magic, so they get fired up, and start attacking the golems with everything they have. Cross teaches the archers how to work with the mages, so that they can use fire arrows to take down the golems, while Dagaz protects Silica as she uses her destructive spells. Lloyd watches the battle from a tower, hoping they'll win the fight, and Yui realizes that there's one golem left. A warrior charges in, but his sword shatters, and the golem knocks him down, while Yui realizes that Lloyd's spell has worn off. So the knights run away as the golem approaches the gate, but Yui blocks its path, and it prepares to attack her. So Rena pushes her to safety, while Dagaz uses his shield to block the attack, but he still gets knocked down. Lloyd uses the last of his mana to buff Yui, and she tells the tanks to support her, as she rushes towards the golem. So they block its attack, and she slices its core in half, causing it to crumble. Everyone realizes that the battle is over, so they celebrate their victory, but Lloyd is just glad that it's finally over, and he collapses from exhaustion. But we see William watching him from a distance, and he realizes that Lloyd is doing better with his new party. Meanwhile, Grist visits Mikkel, and tells him their operation has failed, but he realizes that Mikkel has already left. So he becomes angry and destroys everything in the room, as he blames Mikkel for their failure, and he notes that he'll kill the person who ruined his plans. We return to Lloyd, as he wakes up in an inn, and Yui tells him he's slept the whole day. He thinks he collapsed because he isn't strong enough, but Yui tells him to come with her, and she shows him the people he saved. They all call him their savior, but he suddenly closes the door, telling her he's afraid because there are too many of them. She tells him to get out there, because they all want to meet him, but he jumps out of the window and sneaks past them. William visits Merlin at her house, where he sees her teammates Thor and Lily, and Lily calls him the Phantom Alchemist, because she knows that he's been making potions. But he notes that he's been focused on gathering information lately, and he tells Merlin that Lloyd was kicked out of the heroes party. But he tells her not to worry, because he's now a member of an S-rank team, and William mentions that he hasn't talked to him, but he knows that Lloyd isn't confident in his abilities. William explains that he doesn't understand how capable he is, and Merlin knows that she's the reason why he lacks confidence, but she explains that she doesn't want him to repeat her mistakes. We return to Lloyd, as he wonders why everyone in the town is chasing him, so his friends tell him that they want to thank him for saving the city. He thinks he didn't do much during the fight, but his friends tell him to have more confidence in himself, and he decides to show himself to everyone. Everyone cheers for him, but he thinks they should be cheering for the knights and adventurers instead, because they were the ones who fought the monsters. But they explain that he was the one who buffed them, and everyone starts calling him the hero of Ishtar. After that, Alan learns about what happened, and his party members tell him they're no longer heroes, because they didn't defend the town. so he tells his friends they need to leave Ishtar, explaining that he doesn't want to stay there because the people recognize Lloyd as a hero. We return to William as he starts drinking with Merlin's party, and he notes that it's an honor to drink with them, but they know that he went there to commemorate Sybil. Thor asks him if their enemies are making moves, so he notes that the demons are using orc magic to control monsters, revealing that their goal is to conquer Ishtar. He wonders why they're acting at this moment, and thinks the Demon King must have returned, but Merlin believes that he's already dead, because Sybil sacrificed his life to defeat him. Thor tells her to stay calm, because it's just a possibility, and they decide to do whatever it takes to protect the future that Sybil created for them. Lloyd's party is summoned by the Lord, and they meet a noble named Abel, who recognizes them as the adventurers who saved Ishtar. He invites them into his mansion, where they meet Claire, so they ask her if she was also summoned. But Abel explains that she's his guest, and reveals that he's the ruler of the domain, which surprises everyone, because they didn't expect the Lord to be so young. But he reveals that he's older than he looks, and explains that it takes effort to maintain his appearance, promising to teach them his secret in the future. Everyone's surprised to learn that Claire is the second princess of the Forez Empire, which is a peaceful nation where orcs reside, and Abel notes that her magic is unique, so they can't let the demons capture her. He tells them he has a mission for them, and notes that the Empire will retrieve her, so he needs them to take her to the royal capital. They realize it's an important mission, but they think it's the knight's duty to escort the princess, so Abel explains that he wants them to do it instead, because the knights would attract attention. They prepare to leave for the capital, and Claire tells everyone to be casual with her, but Cross and Dottis can't do it because they know that she's a princess. But Yui removes her gloves to shake her hand, telling her she's looking forward to working with her, and everyone promises to do their best to protect her. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.